Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into the invisible cost of outsourcing our thinking. We're living in the AI age, right? We have literally infinite knowledge at our fingertips. But what is it actually doing to our brains? We're going to explore exactly that, starting with a remarkably common 1.5-second habit that you've almost certainly developed without even realizing it. So let's jump right in.
Picture this incredibly relatable scenario from our source material. Imagine you're standing by the office kettle, the bad one that takes forever to boil. You ask a junior colleague a high-stakes, highly nuanced question about a client, and before she even opens her mouth to answer, there's this strategic 1.5-second pause. And in that tiny gap, she instinctively reaches for her phone. Now, she catches herself, laughs it off, and gives a totally great answer. But the reach happened first. That autonomic reach, worn so smooth it doesn't even register as a conscious decision anymore, is exactly where our story begins.
Now you might be thinking, this is just a quirk of younger workers. But the author of our source text realized they did the exact same thing in a totally different context. They were drafting a message to a grieving friend, just a simple condolence note, 16 words maybe. Yet sitting there with their thumbs hovering over the keyboard, they felt this very specific, hollow panic of not knowing what they thought until something offered to tell them. And so, they reached for the machine.
So I really want to ask you directly, have you noticed the reach? Seriously. Consider the way your own hand probably moves to your pocket right now when faced with a blank page or a slightly tricky question. We have literally started outsourcing the very process of thought itself. But what is this actually costing us?
To find out, we have to look at the science. Section 1, the MIT Brain Study. What happens when we outsource?
We were all told that AI tools were going to act like dishwashers for our minds, right? They'd handle the boring mental grunt work so we could free up our higher faculties for all the interesting thinking. But researchers pointed out a massive flaw in that promise. Those quote-unquote boring parts actually run on the exact same wiring as our higher faculties. A June 2025 experiment from the MIT Media Lab coined a fascinating term for offloading this work: cognitive debt. It is a debt you take on right now for convenience, but you repay it later, with interest at a moment of the lender's choosing.
The hard data from that MIT study is honestly staggering. They wired 54 people up with 32 electrode EEG caps and had them write essays. The group using only their brains lit up like a switchboard, super high connectivity. The group using a traditional search engine was moderate, but the group leaning heavily on ChatGPT, their neural connectivity dropped by a staggering 55% compared to the brain-only group. Basically, the more help they leaned on, the quieter their heads went.
Now, you might be thinking, well, lower brain activity is just efficiency. It's like a calculator making math faster. But we really need to look at the detail that completely shatters that defense. Section 2, the empty station phenomenon, the detail that should frighten you.
That calculator defense sounds pretty great, right up until you see this number. Minutes after finishing their AI-assisted essays, researchers asked the ChatGPT group to, quote, a single line, just one sentence from the work that literally had their name on it. An overwhelming 83% of them completely failed to do so. Think about how wild that actually is.
And this brilliantly illustrates a truly terrifying concept. As the source text describes it perfectly, the words had passed through them like a train through a station, present, briefly, stopping nowhere. See, when you aren't the one actively constructing the argument, wrestling with the syntax and the ideas, you don't actually own the logic. It simply passes through your mind without leaving a trace. The brain-only group, on the other hand, quoted themselves easily because you remember the house you laid the bricks for.
Furthermore, the researchers ran this thing called a swap test. They forced long-term AI users to put the tools away completely and write with nothing but their own minds. And the result? They performed significantly worse than people who had never used AI at all. The muscle hadn't just gone unused while they enjoyed the convenience of the tool, it had quietly slackened. They were diminished even after the crutch was taken away.
So, the absolutely crucial point to take away from this is that these tools don't immediately make you stupid. What they do is make you absent. And absence, repeated daily for a year, is completely indistinguishable from genuine cognitive atrophy.
To really ground this abstract neuroscience in a tangible, everyday reality, let's look at Section 3, cabbies versus the sat-nav, navigating the tangible brain.
Years ago, University College London put volunteers in brain scanners and had them navigate a simulation of Soho's incredibly complex 7-way junctions. When volunteers navigated manually, their hippocampus and prefrontal cortex spiked hard. Their brains lit up, firing on all cylinders, simulating possible futures and making tough choices.
But the exact moment a turn-by-turn sat-nav voice took over, those exact same brain regions didn't just dim, they went completely dark. Sensibly, the brain just stops simulating the journey the moment something else volunteers to do the heavy lifting.
And this creates two very different drivers navigating the exact same city. On one side, you have the passive sat-nav driver relying on a phone. They arrive at the destination knowing nothing, having grown nothing, and they are completely ready to be lost the second their battery dies. On the other side, you have the legendary London black cab drivers. To pass their exam, they do the hard reps of getting lost on purpose thousands of times. Because of this, they literally physically grow a larger hippocampus. They carry the entire city in their skull because they paid for it the hard way.
Which brings us to the core thesis of our explainer. Section 4. The atrophy tax, the hidden cost of convenience.
Every task now offers us a quiet choice. Do it yourself or let the machine do it. The machine is instantly cheaper, right? It saves you 10 minutes and fills a blank page completely friction-free. But the tax isn't on the receipt. The atrophy tax is levied invisibly on the mental capacity you chose not to exercise. The trap isn't that AI writes a bad 16-word condolence note. The trap is that 1,000 perfectly decent outsourced moments add up to a person who has completely forgotten how to find their own thoughts. As this absolutely powerful quote states, convenience is a loan against a version of yourself you haven't met yet, and he's the one who pays.
So how do we fix this? Section 5. Reclaiming your mind. Keeping the load-bearing work actually load-bearing.
Now look, the solution isn't to throw your phone in a river and go off the grid. The search engine group in the MIT study actually did fine because they didn't outsource the core thinking part. The goal here is cognitive agency. So, here are 4 practical reps you can implement into your day immediately to protect your gray matter.
First, think first, then check. Produce a draft, even a totally wrong answer, before letting AI correct you. The brain that commits to a guess processes corrections completely differently. Second, protect one hard thing a day. Pick an uncomfortable, nuanced task, like a really tricky email, and do it entirely by hand. Third, test your recall to avoid that empty station effect we talked about. Close the tab and try to explain what you just produced. If you can't, you didn't do the work. And finally, get lost on purpose. Choose the harder path. Sit with the blank page just a beat longer. That discomfort you feel, it isn't a bug to be optimized away. That discomfort is quite literally the feeling of your mental muscles firing.
All of this brings us right back to where we started. The kettle, and that 1.5-second gap before the reach. Because that tiny, fleeting window is the whole game now. It is the ultimate junction. In that 1.5 seconds, you decide if you are the architect of your thoughts or merely the host for someone else's.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a question to really think about. When you navigate the daily junctions of your life, faced with the constant temptation of instant convenience, which driver are you becoming? Are you choosing the path of the sat-nav or the cabbie? The choice and the mind you ultimately build is completely yours.